I'm excited to share an amazing story of two men. This story transpired in the closing days of the Vietnam War when Saigon was evacuated. One man was a Vietnamese pilot from South Vietnam. The other, the Navy's first black United States aircraft carrier commanding officer. They would be brought together by two very fateful actions, one man trying to save his family, and the other with a very courageous decision that would ultimately save lives. Please enjoy.
But my name is Admiral Victor Hall, and it's my honor to serve as the Master of Ceremonies today for this very special occasion, Flight to Freedom, remembering the 01 Bird Dog and USS Midway. Today we gather together to remember and reflect the incredible events 50 years ago during the final days of the Vietnam War. And I can see, including myself, many of us in the Vietnam era veterans, bittersweet part of our history. But this story is not. This is a very shiny moment that you're about to hear today. It's phenomenal. And it's about the anniversary of Operation Frequent Wind. And to honor the iconic moments of naval history, when a South Vietnamese Air Force pilot, Major Bung Lee, landed his 01 Bird Dog on the deck of the USS Midway, carrying his family to freedom. We're deeply honored to actually have the actual Cessna 01 in our museum here over in Hangar Bay 1. And after this ceremony, you'll have an opportunity to go over and really get an impersonal look and, of that famous aircraft and talk to some of the people that were involved in it. We're going to begin today with a presentation of the colors from the Naval Aviation Training Technical Command Performing Unit. So I'd ask everyone to please rise. And then I'll ask you to stay standing while we do the national anthem performed by this wonderful group of musicians here from Tate High School and our invocation. Present colors. Present the colors. Post colors. Let us pray. Almighty Father and Lord of all, keeper of life and conqueror of death, this morning, as we honor your name above all, we thank you for the plains in this cathedral that have stories to tell, stories of lives of many who have both survived and have paid the ultimate sacrifice. We ask for your blessings upon all those involved with Operation Frequent Wind and those seeking flights to freedom. Keep these stories alive in us today. We reflect today of the heroic events 50 years ago, of the decision, the ethical decision ordained by you to honor life above the material on board the USS Midway
and the rescue of 7 souls. Bless Admiral Chambers for his decision to save their lives, a decision to grant the bird dog observation plane to land. Give him the blessing of a mission done right. Bless Major Bung Lee for his care and love for his family, superseded the challenge of landing a small Cessna tail dragger onto a floating island. May his courage be an inspiration to us all. Continue to be a beacon of hope to him and his family. Bless his entire family, and especially Miss Nung Lee Collard as she experienced the heroicism of her father. Thank you for her willingness to share in this event today. Their story is an inspiration of hope in the midst of a desperate battle. Surround us all with your presence. Bless us that all have gathered here today. Give us comfort and peace during our own battles. Calm the storms on the horizon and give us hope for tomorrow. It is in your holy name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to you all. Please be seated. I'd like to express our sincere gratitude to Rear Admiral Kyle Kozad, President and CEO of the Museum Foundation, Captain Sterling Gillum, the Museum Director, and also Diana Hayden, Director of Education, for really putting this together and allowing us to celebrate as we are today. A lot of work went into this, and I hope you all will enjoy it and appreciate it. We're also to have some distinguished guests here today. One that I get to say hello to on a couple occasions is our World War II veteran, PBY pilot, Lieutenant Commander Cash. Yes. Commander Barber, welcome again. Always good to see you, sir. And also your family. Can't leave that out. Okay. Also, special guests, we have Major Bung Lee and his family, Rear Admiral Lawrence Chambers and Mrs. Sarah Jones Chambers, along with our special guests today. Now, please enjoy an Armed Forces salute performed by the Tate Wind Ensemble in tribute to the men and women from all branches of the Armed Forces. And you are welcome to stand when your anthem theme comes up or is being played. So with that, hard to believe those are high school students, right? I mean, you guys are awesome. Great job, great job. Now, truly to appreciate the significance of the Bird Dog's final mission and the heroic actions aboard the Midway, you got to understand the context and the courage of those who served. So we're going to have a couple presenters today, and we're going to begin with Mr. Hill Goodspeed, who's the director or deputy director for the Naval Museum, to set the stage from a historical perspective of what we're actually the commemorations are for today. And then following Mr. Goodspeed, we're going to hear from two guests that bring some firsthand knowledge and the powerful insight to the event. Captain Tony McFarlane, a flight deck supervisor on the USS Midway, and Captain Ed Ellis, a JAG officer aboard the USS Midway. So with that, I'd like to welcome Mr. Goodspeed to give his talk.
Thank you. Midway. It is a word that on so many levels is the embodiment of naval aviation history and heritage. A landmark battle that inspired the name of an aircraft carrier that was the scene of the event we commemorate today. Connections to both abound in this museum. A prize element of our collection is the only surviving aircraft to have flown in the battle. That SPD Dauntless dive bomber has patches covering bullet holes in the fuselage that speak to the intensity of the air actions in June of 1942. Also in the collection is a life vest that belonged to Ensign George Gay, the sole survivor of the carrier-based element of Torpedo Squadron 8 and its attack against the Japanese fleet from USS Hornet. On March 20th, 1945, he was present at Newport News Shipbuilding for the christening of the Navy's newest aircraft carrier, USS Midway. In Hangar Bay 1, right behind me, our aircraft with ties to that carrier's service in the Vietnam War. In 1965, while assigned to Attack Squadron 25, the Fist of the Fleet, our A-1H Skyraider flew combat missions from the deck of Midway during the earliest days of the intense air campaign over North Vietnam that was known as Operation Rolling Thunder. It was in the air with the other Skyraiders on June 20th, 1965, when two of those propeller-driven aircraft performed the rare feat of shooting down a jet-powered MiG-17. Nearly 7 years later, which speaks to the length of the Vietnam War, the F-4 Phantom II on display in Hangar Bay 1 made its most momentous flight from the deck of Midway. On May 18th, 1972, while flying with the VF-161 Rock Rivers, pilot Lieutenant Patrick Arwood and radar intercept officer Lieutenant Mike Bell, a recent graduate of Top Gun, engaged a North Vietnamese MiG-19. I thought it missed. The warhead exploded, but the missile itself kept going, Arwood recalled. Then a huge chunk of metal came off the starboard side of the tail area. The MiG pitched up severely, almost like it came to a dead stop. It pitched up like a barn door, and the tail end looked like it exploded, a big fireball just at the exhaust of the plane. It was one of only two MiG-19 shot down by the Navy during the Vietnam War. Overflying these warbirds in Hangar Bay 1, suspended from a beam in the markings of the South Vietnamese Air Force, is the O-1 Bird Dog. Subsequent speakers who were there that day will tell you about its amazing story and the family on board that played out on April 30th, 1975. I want to tell you about a unique connection that airplane has to the man who's considered the founder of this museum, Rear Admiral Magruder H. Tuttle. In our collection here at the museum is a scrapbook documenting an April 21st, 1989 ceremony commemorating the sponsorship of that bird dog by Admiral Tuttle. It was a grand event. Rear Admiral Chambers was there that day, as was Major Lee with his wife and 4 of his 5 children. At 80 years of age, Admiral Tuttle was present as well. Photographs show him at the ceremony and the luncheon afterward. On his finger is a Naval Academy class ring, he being a graduate in the class of 1932. A few years later, I conducted an interview with him, and as the recently hired historian here at the museum. I remember that ring. You couldn't miss it because, as you know, all aviators talk with their hands. And being struck by how shiny and new it appeared, especially for being more than 60 years old and having spent years at sea in the salt air on the ring of a career naval officer. Afterward, I did some research about the Admiral's family and learned that one of his sons had flown as an Army helicopter pilot in the famous battle that was the inspiration for the book and then the movie, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. Another son followed in his father's footsteps and attended the Naval Academy and was a member of the class of 1967. Marine Second Lieutenant Robert Tuttle was killed in action the following year when a landmine exploded near him while he led a patrol near Quang Nam province in South Vietnam. He was just 22 years old. The reason that class ring on Admiral Tuttle's finger was so shiny was that it had belonged to his son. And I think that perhaps it speaks to the reason he chose to sponsor this particular aircraft that is the centerpiece of the commemoration today. He experienced firsthand the sadness of a life the Vietnam War took away. This tiny observation airplane represented the saving of 7 lives in the waning days of that long and bitter conflict. That flight remains one of the most inspiring stories we tell in a museum made possible by Rear Admiral Magruder H. Tuttle. Thank you.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Captain Tony McFarlane. Going back to the days on board the mighty ship Midway, I reported aboard shortly after the Midway arrived in Japan in 1973. The Midway has had its reputation as where a lot of young men, young boys, became men. And in this particular event, during what we commemorate today, many of us became men. From what had transpired in the excitement, the jubilation, the nervousness at the beginning, and the applause at the end. The day leading up to the bird dog landing on board Midway, my job on the flight deck was the Fly 1 petty officer, the young E5, supervising the forward area of the ship. On this particular day, we all were supervising the entire ship. We had on board at the beginning of this evolution, we had over 10 Air Force H-53 helicopters that, or the flight deck of the Midway became an amphibious assault ship that transported individuals to and from to the ship. As these airplanes landed and the folks got off, they were ferried down to the hangar deck or off the flight deck, and then the sky opened up with, as far as our eyes could see, it was a flurry of airplanes, helicopters. Some of them you would think would not be able to fly. but they did. And on this particular day, our entire flight deck, every yellow shirt, every blue shirt, became aircraft directors, aircraft handlers, in bringing all those airplanes on board the ship safely. Not one individual got hurt. And remember, this is an event that is not normal for an aircraft carrier, a CV aircraft carrier. But the crew did it. The Midway had a reputation and a name we called Midway Magic, because everything that's done on board that ship was magical. In these days, during the fall of Saigon, it was pure magic. That's the only way I could describe it. When we as aircraft handlers were trained and taught that these aircraft, any aircraft, are assets, and we should always guard them, prevent them from crunches and other things. And to bring these aircraft aboard, and then when we got the flight deck was clobbered, and when we got the okay to make room when this airplane come passing us and dropped a couple of notes. The first time fell in the water. The second time he made another pass and dropped another note. It fell in the water. I believe on the third attempt, he came back around again, and I believe it was in his holster that this note was stuffed, which was a little heavier, and it landed on the flight deck. Their crew ran out, picked up this note, took it inside, took it to the bridge, and shortly thereafter, we don't know what all was going on the bridge. We, as young enlisted men, really didn't care. We were just excited about what we were doing. And then we got the word from the tower to make room to recover this aircraft. Aircraft, no tail hook, totally different from what we are familiar with, to bring them aboard. Immediately, the crew, with excitement, we had to shove a few airplanes over the side. And again, we were always told to protect the assets. However, in doing this, we put several airplanes over the side in order to make room for this aircraft to land. As this aircraft made its approach, it began to rain. The flight deck was soaked. And this pilot something we have never experienced in our career, put this airplane down on the flight deck, immediately cut the engine, and the aircraft rolled. I had briefed my crew earlier that if this airplane is not able to stop, we're going to run out and grab a hold of the wing and keep it from going over the side. Thankfully, we didn't have to do that. The airplane came to stop just short of the end of the runway. And of course, the crew emerged on the aircraft in order to get the pilot out. And we were told that his family was also on board. We got Mrs. Lee out. And as I say, we weren't aware of how many people at the time was on that airplane. And as we opened up Mr. Lee and his wife came off, and we pulled another young toddler out, and another one, and another one, and they were still coming. And 5 kids later emerged from this airplane. That was the day that the jubilation that our crew felt, knowing that these lives were spared by our crew, is hard to speak of. But our crew got together, and later on we ended up sponsoring this family because they became our family, the Midway family. And on the 35th anniversary of the Bird Dog in San Diego, I had the privilege of attending and learned a little bit more about that particular day from Major Lee and also from my former skipper, now Admiral, then Captain Chambers. It was excitement, as it is today, 50 years later, and it's so good, it's such a privilege to actually see them again. Thank you.
Gotten older. It's good to see you. When I joined the Midway as a young lieutenant commander, just caught, one of the things you always look for is examples of leadership. There's one right there. I remember when I took the note up to the bridge, the captain said, "We need to talk to Admiral Harris." Admiral Harris wasn't the most pleasant individual I've ever dealt with, but we went up there and the Admiral recommended against bringing this aircraft aboard the ship. And if I remember correctly, the skipper looked the Admiral in the eye and said, "Admiral, this is my ship and that's my decision." He put his career on the line. Thank you, sir. But one of the things that you look at when you look at this evacuation is not this big event, but what went into the planning. I got the call from the XO over the squawk box. He said, "Ed, we've been ordered to participate in Operation Frequent Wind. I'm putting you in charge of the ship's planning." Only thing you can tell the XO is, "Aye, aye, sir," and you march off. Well, what did we have to plan for? We had to worry about security. We had to worry about safety. We had to worry about sanitation. We had to worry about accounting for everybody. I wasn't real sure how we could do it, but we got together. The supply corps came through like champs. They ordered in extra rice because we knew we were going to have to feed people. My roommate, the damage control assistant, Herb Colburn, said when I was a young enlisted man, the heads on the carriers were just troughs with running water through them. So we constructed one out on the elevator so people would have a place to go to the bathroom. They're going to be down on the hangar deck. What are we going to do? They can't lay on the steel deck. Supply department loaded on all the bubble wrap they could find in Subic Bay, cut it up in 3 by 6 foot sheets, and that's what people laid on in the hangar deck. It was just a total effort by everybody in that crew. We looked at the flight deck. Tony is pretty sensitive about flight decks and the non-skid that's on a flight deck. Huey helicopters don't have wheels. We would have had to drag them across that flight deck and destroy it in order to get them out of the way for other helicopters to land. Engineering said, "Let's get some channel iron, weld some wheels to them, put that under the skids, and we can tow them off without any problem." That's what we did. Every time we had a problem, somebody on the ship had a solution. And it was a total effort for that entire group. It's something I'll never forget. And after it was all over with, we looked back on it and said, "Wow, did we do that?" I know in the planning stage, the State Department told us to prepare for 1,500 people. We said the State Department has never been right about anything. So we planned for 3,000, and I think we took 3,200 people on board. We had the only injury we had in that entire evolution was somebody twisted an ankle in a pad eye on the flight deck, and that was it. But everybody in sick bay was ready to go. The flight deck crew performed magnificently, and when I look at what Tony says about them volunteering to jump on the wings, I remember that. And I didn't know whether the engine was going to be shut off or not, and I thought somebody could get hurt doing this, and they weren't worried about it. They were not going to let that plane go over the side. So when you talk about this operation, from the youngest sailor on the Midway to the skipper, I won't include the admiral because he wasn't in favor of it, it was a wholehearted effort to put that together and make it happen and save people, and that's what we did. Thank you.
Wow. Now that you've heard kind of the perspectives that led up to this event, and we've prepped the battlefield of the story to come, I'd like to introduce two of the really big heroes in this story. I'd like to first introduce our special guest, Major Bung Lee, South Vietnamese Air Force.
Well, hello everyone. For the novices, I'd rather to fly than stand here. But anyway, my name is Bung Lee, and today is my honor to be here to tell you the story how the 01 Bird Dog ended up in the museum. On the April 30th, 1975, when Saigon fell, my life was in danger. So I took up the 01 Bird Dog to fly out with my wife and my 5 children to looking for the safe plane. After half an hour of flying, I saw a lot of different helicopters heading in the same direction. It made me believe they know something out there they can depend on. So I follow in the same direction. Sure enough, a few minutes later, I saw a big boat with a lot of helicopter and American jet. It made me believe that where all the helicopter heading to, and they can depend on. So by that time, I think if they let them land, they will let me land too. But I cannot use my radio because I didn't have the headphone with me. So I have no way to call them to let them know I want to land on them. When I told the story this much, my small granddaughter asked me if nobody have the cell phone to use. But anyway, I circle around and around the ship to find a way to ask them, to let them know I want to land on their runway. It made me so nervous. And finally, I tried to drop note to them to let them, I have my family with me, I want to land. And the first 3 notes, it bowed off the deck to the water. And the last one is stay on. And I saw someone ran into it and run back inside quickly. And I keep watching them. A few minutes later, I saw some soldier try to clear the deck. And it made me believe they made me try to clear the runway and let me land. I mean, I tried to circle around the deck. I tried to circle around the ship, and I rocked my wing. I turned on and off my landing light. I tried to tell them I don't have no radio, but I want to land. But they all give me the red light. But finally, with that note, I saw the green light. It means they ready for me to land. But now, come to the decision. My airplane have no tailhood. And I never land on the carrier in my life. But what can I do? And I look back to my family, and my gut told me I could do it, and I did it. And after my airplane stopped, a lot of sailors surround us with my wife, and they all help my children and my wife off the airplane. And 2 sailors walked me to inside for the interview. And honestly, I do not remember what they asked me nor what my answer. And then they walked me to the other room. And during that walk, I asked myself, what are they doing to me next? I just lost my country, and now are they trying to remove my pilot license too? But the outcome is different. They welcome me, they congratulate me, and I believe this gentleman gave me a Navy pilot wing. And to me, that's the upgrade license. And after that, my family have to move to make room for the other. Ladies and gentlemen, my family have been reside in Florida for the last 50 years. Over this year, a lot of wonderful things happened to my family. My children, my wife, and myself to become a naturalized American citizen. We have all grown all together, and now we do have 4 generations. And all of this was possible because we have saved by the U.S. Midway in 1975. And today, I would like to say thank you to the Bird Dog, to Rear Admiral Chambers, to Commander Chambers, to all the men who served in the USS Midway 1975, and to National Naval Aviation Museum. Now to the Bird Dog. When my entire family got into her, we overload her. But it seemed she didn't mind. And nor hesitate, and rather willing to fly my family offshore and land safely on the Midway. And I will thank her for that. For the Admiral Chamber, Commander Chambers, and all the men who served in the USS Midway in 1975. I would like to thank each and every one of them to do everything to save my family. Special with Admiral Chambers and Commander Chambers, to let me land. That decision was priceless and will never forgotten. Without that decision, and of course, a safe landing, my family would not be here today. And thank you all for the contribution to my family at that time. And for the National Naval Aviation Museum, thank you for making room and share the O1 Bird Dog with the entire world. Yes, it's forever on display to be shared with others about the amazing historic journey from Vietnam to new address, Pensacola, Florida. And finally, I would like to thank Rear Admiral Koza, President of the Navy Aviation Museum Foundation, and Sterling Gilliam, Director of National Naval Aviation Museum. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here today. It has been a true pleasure for our family. And thank you all very much.
Wow, right? Wow, that's all I can say. You've just heard a phenomenal story from a phenomenal man and a true hero. Now, as our keynote speaker, Rear Admiral Lawrence Chambers, you're going to hear another phenomenal story, another phenomenal hero. And I will tell you, in my 39 years of naval service, probably one of the most selfless decisions in command that I've ever witnessed and heard. And I hope those young Marines in the back, those second lieutenants sitting there, pay a really good attention to what this man has to say, because doing the right thing is not always the easiest thing to do. So with that, Admiral.
I don't know, where everybody stole my speech. I had all of these nice things I was going to say and praise everybody and thank everybody. So I'll do the best I can. You know, it's a lot easier to make a night carrier landing than it is to stand in front of a whole bunch of people and give a speech. I've got 361 night ones. You can have them all back. I didn't make 1,000. I got about 900 and something. And this is the place where it all started. I flew that airplane. I flew that one. I flew that one. I even flew one of those with floats. Does that tell you how old I am? I want to talk to you about those heroic days at the close of the Vietnam War and why that U.S. Army bird dog is hanging in our Naval Air Museum. It all started for me when I took command of Midway in March of 1975. Say again? Thank you. I should warn you, that's my publicist. Somebody has to keep me honest. But try it again. It all started when I took command of Midway in March of 1975. We departed Yokosuka, Japan on the 28th of March, and you can see that all of this activity happened within my first month of command. We were scheduled for a port call in Subic Bay, Philippines, for routine upkeep and to take on fuel. Rear Admiral Bill Harris, United States Naval Academy class of 48, was embarked in Midway as our strike group commander. He was my boss, and we would soon discover that he was one hell of a tough guy to work for. But just a minor geography lesson. This is a map of the area, and if you look around, I put a little scribe on there for 1,000 nautical miles, and you'll get to see how large the area that we were operating. When we reached port in the Philippines, we were ordered to maintain readiness to get underway in 4 hours. Now, we were scheduled for upkeep, and all of you ship drivers know that if I've got to keep live steam and be ready to get underway in 4 hours, I'm not going to get a hell of a lot of maintenance done. On 18 April, just 3 days into our scheduled 10-day upkeep period, Sink-Pack Fleet ordered Midway to get underway. We recalled the Liberty Party, offloaded all fixed-wing aircraft on the flight deck by crane, dispatched 500 men to leave behind with our beach detachment to take care of the aircraft that we just offloaded. The next morning, we rendezvoused with the U.S. Air Force 40th Aerospace Rescue Squadron off the southern tip of South Vietnam. No longer did I have a flight deck full of fighter and attack aircraft. I am now a helicopter carrier with a flight deck full of Air Force HH-53s, better known as Super Jolly Green Giants. My skipper's worst nightmare just came true. We practiced drills to improve readiness for the possible evacuation of Saigon. But since there were no spare parts for the Air Force 53s, I couldn't risk practicing those guys, and I knew there was going to be some night ops, and I was worried. On station, Midway was assigned to Task Force 76. Midway now reported to Commander Task Force 76 on 20 April, and my commander was Rear Admiral Donald Boone Whitmire, Naval Academy class of 46, All-American tackle at Alabama, All-American tackle at Navy, and I think Alabama could have used him last year. He is now my boss for the duration of frequent wind, a great guy to work for, but Admiral Harris was still on the on the flag bridge, and he was still along for the ride. Please note, there were 25 amphibious ships in this operation, and the big guys were USS Hancock CV-19, USS Okinawa LPH-3, and Midway CV-41. I borrowed this chart from the internet. It shows a general disposition of the amphibs off of Vung Tau. Midway was the largest guy out there. We had the deepest draft, and we needed the most sea room. So for most of the operation, we were at least 100 nautical miles at sea. While we were awaiting the official start of Operation Frequent Wind, the Vice Premier and former head of the South Vietnamese Air Force, Nguyen Cao Ky, arrived on board Midway without notice at 10 o'clock in the morning on 29 April. I immediately received dispatch from the flagship ordering me to send the Premier, the Vice Premier, and his occupants over to Blue Ridge, to Admiral Quidmeyer's staff. They reached Blue Ridge somewhere around noon that afternoon. As I mentioned, because of our lack of spare parts on the part of the Air Force helicopters, we did not practice night carrier landings, and I was concerned. I did have a plan up my sleeve, however. Air Force pilots hadn't done a whole lot of night stuff around aircraft carriers, and from 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the tropics, you know, the rest of this operation after the first wave is going to be after dark. About 5 p.m., the first wave arrived from Saigon, and Operation Frequent Wind begins. All of you around here know, you're all associated with naval aviation, you know that that flight deck is a hazardous place anytime, but at night and full of civilians, it could be deadly. I was worried. To make sure the chaos was controlled, I authorized Midway's Marine detachment the use of deadly force if necessary to disarm everyone coming on board. And there was a little incident. A reporter got off and he was confronting a Marine with a rifle in his hand and was trying to give the Marine a hard time. And I don't know, it kind of scared me. But my first lieutenant, Lieutenant Commander Jim Roper, saw these guys, walked over and wanted to know what the hell was going on. And the reporter says, I want a receipt for my pearl-handled revolvers. Jim Roper ripped out his notebook, wrote a note, tore out a page, handed it to him. The guy took the revolvers and he walked over to the side and threw them over the side per my orders. My magazines were full. I didn't have any place to stow them. It's hard to imagine that some of the Huey helicopters arrived on deck with more than 50 people on board. And you guys know what a Huey looks like. They were designed for a squad of 10 Army or 10 Marines heavily armed for combat, not 50 people with luggage and kids. This is the original, oops, thank you. She should come and give it. She's better at it than I am. This was original shock and awe, and this little kid surely had his world turned upside down, and as you can see, the family is just as distressed. After we fed the regiment, we took everybody down to the hangar deck. We examined everybody medically. We fed everybody, and each of those, I had 10 of those big H-53s on board, and they brought on with each trip anywhere from 1,500 to, from 105 to 200 people. And so with 10 of those guys, the first wave gave me over 1,000 people to deal with. But after we fed them and checked them medically, we transferred as many as possible to the other ships in company. Meanwhile, back in Saigon, desperation was mounting. Please note that that helicopter was full, and there's one hell of a fight going on for other people trying to still get on board. The next day, on 30 April, the U.S. ambassador to South Vietnam, Mr. Graham Martin, was one of the last people to be evacuated from the U.S. Embassy, along with my Naval Academy roommate, Captain Hugh Benton, who was a submariner, and he was a sink pack rep on the ambassador's staff. Other refugees continued to arrive. In the middle of the chaos on day 2, that gentleman back there arrived on the scene. It was obvious to me he wanted to land. Admiral Harris, my administrative boss, was still along for the ride. And he was telling me not to do it. And, you know, you're caught between the rock and the hard place, folks. However, the poor guy sitting in the big chair, it's his responsibility. You can't give it to anybody. You're stuck no matter what happens. And so I had to ignore what the Admiral was yelling at me. But remember, he's my administrative boss. I have changed operational control to the amphibs. I'm working for the other Admiral. And there you have it. This gentleman back here dropped about 3 notes. They went over the side. I didn't need the notes. I knew what the hell he wanted. He wanted me to clear the deck, give him an opportunity to become a carrier aviator. I finally got a copy of the note. They ran it up to me. It was wrapped in his pistol. The pistol hit the crash truck, and that kept it on board. And it read, "Can you move these helicopter to the other side? I can land on your runway. I can fly 1 hour more. We have enough time. Please rescue me." And it was signed, Major Bung, wife and 5 child. That's a direct quote. And, you know, he didn't have enough gas to make it back to the beach. So what am I going to do? He's circling. The Admiral's yelling at me. I called Vern Jumper, my air boss, and say, "Hey, big guy, we're going to make a ready deck." Vern suggested that I had lost my mind. Now, that wasn't exactly the quote, and I think all of you know who've been fooling around with air bosses, you can imagine what the hell he was saying. I told Vern I was going to give him some help, ordered all Air Wing and Air Department personnel not on watch to report to the flight deck. Well, in addition, the Marines and probably everybody else that wasn't on watch, including the JOs, you know, I had a hangar deck full of tactical airplanes, and I had the pilots on. Those kids didn't have anything to do, so they all showed up on the flight deck to see what the hell was going on. So I had a 2,000-man working party to help Vern Jumper make a ready deck. And the only thing that saved my butt was the engineer was smart enough to make some wheels, anticipating that we were going to have Hueys on board on skids, and there was no way in hell I was going to push into those over the side. No matter how many tractors I pushed behind, rock the tails, put the wheels on them, and we could roll them around. That way we were able to clear the landing area. By the way, Chief Engineer had a little problem because I had given him permission to shut down 4 or 5 boilers for maintenance. I'm operating helicopters. I got natural wind out there. It was slight overcast, light rain, 1,500 foot overcast, and visibility 8 to 10 miles. So I'm operating helicopters. I'm dead in the water, and I still got enough wind that I don't have to worry about the helicopters. But now I got to worry about a guy that wants to come and land on my flight deck. Told the chief engineer I was going to need some additional steam, and he said, "I don't have enough." So we shut down 2 of our ship service generators and turned on both emergency diesels and took the electrical load on the diesels. And so he had enough enough wind to get to 25 knots, and with 15 gusts into 18, we had about 45 knots of wind on the deck. But after I turned into the wind, and just prior to signaling the bird dog, he didn't have a radio. We had tried to communicate with him on both emergency frequencies. I even grabbed one of the embassy employees who spoke Vietnamese and English, thinking that if he's in panic, maybe he won't understand the English if we talk to him. He would at least understand the Vietnamese. But it turns out he didn't have a radio. So the only thing we had were the Aldous lamps to signal him. But right after I turned into the wind, 8 more Hueys plopped down right in the middle of the flight deck in the landing area without signal. And I'm sure he could see it when he could see what the hell was going on. And Vern Jumper wanted to know, what the hell are we going to do now? And I said, Vern, 8 more Hueys over the side ain't going to make a damn bit of difference to my court-martial. Those go too. I screwed it up again. I'm not real good with this thing. I don't know if I can get back to where, oh, there we go. I can get there. Oh. I mean, you know, aviators used to go walk and chew gum. I think there's a little problem here on this flight deck. Okay, thanks. I had a nice presentation prepared. If I could walk and chew gum, you guys would have gotten a damn good presentation. They weren't really accurate in telling you how much stuff I pushed over the side. I had a whole lot of stuff over the side. They belonged to the U.S. Army, the U.S. Air Force, the South Vietnamese Air Force, and Air America. Not a single damn thing I pushed over the side had USN on it. And I figured... we were right there. Anyway, that 2,000-man working party that had helped clear the deck, man, Vulture's Roost, and all of you guys have been around the boat, that's all that superstructure above the flight deck. And so the Major had one hell of an audience waiting to see what was going to happen. Now, I got 45 knots of wind over the deck. You know, normally we land 28 to 30, sometimes down to 25, because that's all we can get out of the old girl. On the 27 Charlies, they had to dog down the throttle to get enough steam to launch the catapults. It didn't expect to speed very much. But I think this was my third, 1, 2, 3, yeah, this was my 4th tour in Vietnam. But the thing that really amazes you is when you see a problem and you start trying to solve it, the support you get from all of those wonderful people. And I know all you parents out there know that when I take care of a carrier, I've got 5,000 19-year-olds. And all of you know what 19-year-olds are capable of. And the only way you can escape is you work their patooties off so that when they're on the flight deck or wherever they're working, they're so tired they go home and go to sleep. You give them a day off, and boy, you got troubles. It would be nice. I might get through this thing in a minute. But after the successful landing, Midway's crew was so impressed with Major Lee that they collected over $10,000. Big bucks in 1975, and that was forwarded to him to help him and his family get settled back in the US of A. In the middle of the chaos, I had a brief interview with Major Lee on my bridge. I took off my gold wings, and I pinned them on Major Lee and made him an honorary naval aviator right on the spot. Anybody with the balls to do what the hell he did has our respect. He now resides in Orlando, Florida. And are you wondering what happened to Major Lee, the bird dog, and the family? Bird dog hangs from the ceiling right here in the Naval Aviation Museum, I think in one of the other hangars, where a copy of the note that he dropped is on display. My little brother at that time was Colonel Andy Chambers, and he was horse holder to the Chief Staff of the Army. I sent Andy a note and said, I got this terribly beat up old airplane lying on board. We want to send it to Pensacola, and it's not worth anything. And do we have the Army's permission to send it? And I got a note back from Andy saying that the Chief Staff of the Army gave us the bird dog. Now, I lied. That airplane was in great shape. But I thought if we told the Army that we had an airplane that was worth anything, that they would never have said yes, that we could have it. A replica is prominently displayed on Midway's hangar deck. Midway displays the actual note. Guess where the actual note was? It was hanging in my library. And somebody ratted on me and told Midway that I had the note. I donated it to the museum. They sent me a museum quality copy of the note. And frankly, I can't tell the difference. In 2014, Major Lee and I were honored at Sun and Fun Air Show in Lakeland, Florida, for outstanding feats in aviation. But let's face it, folks, we know who in the hell performed the outstanding feat. I was just the runway manager. Lee family now lives in Orlando, Florida. This picture was taken at Sun and Fun Air Show in 2014. Mrs. Lee was there, but her bad back kept her out of the photo. All 5 children became successful professionals, and the Lees now have 8 grandchildren. Also found out at Sun and Fun that Mrs. Lee could not swim. So there was no way in you-know-what that this guy was going to try to ditch that airplane. He was either I was going to give him a place to land or he was going to crash it on board. Thanks to the successful humanitarian efforts of the crew, not only of Midway, but the rest of the amphibs, there are many loyal Vietnamese American citizens in our country today. These brave South Vietnamese patriots and the dedicated sailors and Marines of Midway and Task Force 76 are the real heroes of the helicopter evacuation of Saigon. I am just proud to have been a participant in that